doing this book was not my idea. It was the idea of a press that was in another country. And then I said no, like biblically, like 3 times, or maybe I don't know how many times it is to make it biblical, but cock crows is all the time. Um, I was told it would be fun, and I actually thought it would not be difficult because I'd done the Angela Davis reader, and that became one of the most high selling books. And that was like 98, right? But then it went out of print, and then it was like $100. And then right before this book came out, it came out again, and now it's only $22, so now it's affordable. So like I don't understand the industry because it's just to me it's kind of wacky, right? But I ended up like basically researching for years. So we're talking from 2016, when I said nope, absolutely not. And then it's like, okay, it'll be a piece of cake. I already did the Angela White Davis reader. How hard could this be? And then I started doing the research. And then I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff here that nobody talks about, and it shouldn't be here, but it's here. So it's probably real. Now I have to look at it. And so I ended up with 1,000 pages. And once you get 1,000 pages, you don't know what you're doing. You're just like running around, and the monitors maze is like, I'm going to get gored and I can't get out, right? And so there's a lot of different people reviewing it, and then there's probably some people who are favorable, but I'm not getting the favorable reviews. I'm getting the negative. I'm like, rewrite this thing. So it becomes like, stay on message. And I'm like, the message has multi-layers, and there's other stuff in the message that you can't read because you don't know the code, right? So what you end up with contextualizing is like, I'm going to go from birth 44 to 1970, stop, say a little bit about John having her weapons, right? And then I'm just going to, like, I'm out, right? But it still is important to me because of the context of the Cold War. And when I was organizing as a young person, it was in the context of the Cold War. We're very complex people and intellectuals, but how we're written about and remembered gets a lot of simplification. And so then what you have to do, if the narrative is like, it's just nice and linear, and maybe there's a little bump in the road, but it was only the bad guys because they dig the little hole that made the car go in the bump or something like that. And then you realize, oh no, there's a lot of people out with shovels, like messing stuff up on the road, right? And the road is not a straight road. It meanders. It's moving all over the place, and then you have to jump off and run around a track and get back on. The complexity, now this is going to be stretched, but I'm going to do it. And then as you check me, the complexity of our struggles, I believe, has been simplified. And if our complexity and our risk, like we light the candle and remember the transition, but we do it in a almost, unless you really knew the guerrilla, fighter, in almost a ritualistic way. And we should really look at how our opposition is quite intelligent, and it does not always use brutality. It uses intellect. That's what I mean. Like, they're reading books and archiving them in the FBI and the CIA agencies. They basically have librarians who just sit there and read, like, oh, this book came out. Okay, what are they saying? Oh, what trajectory are they going in? I don't think they're just doing it to be able to chat about a new book released at tea time. I think they're doing it to study not just us, but how we're remembering our own struggles. So the attempt at contextualizing Angela Davis is say it's not just about Davis. And actually, this is from birth to her early mid-20s. She didn't start organizing till she was like 25 or 26, and she came back to the US to get a doctorate at UC San Diego. And even her advisor, Herbert Marcuse, he said she's apolitical. And yeah, but then she's in Germany and she's seeing like everything's going on, people like things start burning down and whatever. And she's like, I need to get back. But if you're a novice in organizing and you really haven't been around the majority of Black people since you were 15 years old and you went to a private high school in Manhattan, sometimes you could walk back in and want to meet everybody. And that's kind of what she did. She met Stokely Carmichael at a conference in London. on dialectics. Herbert Marcuse was also speaking, and she asked Stokely to give her phone numbers that she could call people because she was going back to do the graduate degree in the US. She wasn't going to stay in Europe anymore, right? And she gets there and she writes about this in the autobiography, like either the numbers are bad numbers, they don't exist, or people pick up the phone and they hear some voice, you know, a very cultivated voice say, "Hi, I'd like to join your organization and fight in the revolution with you." Like, and they just hang up, right? So I don't think you can blame, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, that he gave her a bad list of names. It's just that's not, you don't cold call people to
Mm-mm.
get into a revolutionary movement, right? And that's, she realizes that. Then she starts meeting and organizing stuff. But then her decision is to go into the Communist Party USA. So there were a number of groups you could join, but that was going to be the one that she would be faithful to for 20 years, about 20 years, plus maybe. And so this is the context. I'm just saying it's multiple contexts. And our industry actually plays a prominent role. Formal education plays a prominent role in the cultivation of Black leadership that's
Oh
recognized.
my goodness, absolutely. And so again, I think you do a great job of weaving back and forth between, because it's not a heavy, I mean, so one of the questions that I did want to ask you was if I had never if a reader of your book, and then you mentioned that there has been some negative reviews, I would love to see them
Oh, there,
if you would point.
it's worse than that.
I'd love to see what they have to say that
No, I'm sorry if I maybe I
oh
misstated, miswrote. This is me being me,
oh
and I'm not
okay.
always on my best days. But there were negative reviews in the process of getting it
And the peer review. Okay, I got you,
in
got you,
the
got
peer
you, got you.
review. There was
Yeah.
basically there were like threats of lawsuits, right? Which you can't sue me because I'm not doing libel. And yeah, and I'm a scholar. Like, hey, I thought we were supposed to do research. What's the plan here? And so, and
Wow.
also the reviewers are all going to be academics too. So this is what I mean. Our industry can get a little complicated if there's like a certain narrative you have to stay with. And that's why I gave you the story about Afro pessimism. Like if we
Yeah.
don't like that narrative, we're going to disappear it. And I'm like, well, like if you don't like, don't read the book, but don't
Right.
tell the students not to read the book, or worse, they cannot read the book or
Yeah, that's
they will be
crazy.
punished.
That's
That's
crazy.
that's the thing that worries me, and that's why it's like, okay, there's like 1,000 pages. I'm going to get rid of like the vast majority of it, and then I'm going to drill down and just try to make sense out of how complicated these moves are. And the moves largely are done by powerful entities. And I think CPUSA had its own power base too,
Hmm.
in which graduate students and undergrads and younger people are going to be, supported, but also lectured to and trained to stay on message. That's why in the preface, if you notice when I end, after I do that shout out to Charlene Mitchell, and that's she's the only reason I did Transcending the Talented 10. She told me to go to Schomburg, read Du
Yep.
Bois, do something. And I think she was signaling me like you academics are getting out of control with that like your elite stuff. Just like figure out how to get back on the ground. And for me, I always say Ida B. Wells, if Du Bois had not isolated her, he would have had a serious ally, which is what he wanted at the end. But even at the end, even though I thank Charlene Mitchell at the end of that preface, I know I go to Ella Baker. And I recall like when King and the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, wanted the youth to be a youth wing or adjacent, not just adjacent to, but would take directions from the SCLC. Baker told them, be autonomous. Like you can learn from your others, but you're not supposed to mimic them. And you may want to be careful about being trained by them so that you just become a younger version of them. And so I end with that in the preface, the youth have to have autonomy, and hopefully we were saying something cogent or useful that they can study and debate, whatever with us or with each other. But there's got to be a freedom in the freedom movement that allows for autonomous thinking and people going a bit rogue and off script. And for me, Ella Baker represents that more clearly than even someone as incredible as Charlene Mitchell.
No, I saw that. I mean, again, so you're able to. That's why I was interested in what this criticism was, because I get why people would want to be defensive about what you've written here,
Mhm.
especially if they understand the code, as you put it. Because if you understand the code, I think this book is so brilliantly clear that it will likely upset some people. But I did have actually a question also about if you don't know the code and you pick up this book,
I,
especially if all you know of Angela Davis is the symbol, the image, or even her own writing. What? How do you think they would read it, or
yeah,
does that even factor into your
no, that,
consideration?
well, I mean, on one level of honesty, I just wanted to get this book out of my house. It's like either I'm going to burn all these pages or somebody's got to do something with it because I can't be haunted by
Yeah.
this stuff. No, because seriously,
Mm-mm.
and
Yeah.
Davis didn't do any of this, with which I'm about to say. But there are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of dead bodies when you start looking, and they're not all killed by the police. And I'm like, wait, what? How come nobody told me like what's going on here, right? So in a way, the book stops at 1970 because we don't have to get into that other stuff, which is going to be harder to digest if you think this is a difficult text to digest. I think okay, the reason this book is out is because there were other feminists who reached out sorry, for months and like why not, and I didn't even respond because I was just depressed. I was like, everybody leave me alone. And then they were like, they didn't say it would be fun. That's what the male Brit guy said. They just said, we hear there's a project. We've heard there's a project out there. Can we talk to you? And then because I respected them, they're philosophers and I knew some of them, it's like, okay, we'll do a quick chat. And then it finally got done. But it was, I'll be honest with you, it was incredibly painful.
Mm.
And so like I'm not using it as free therapy because I can get some elsewhere. But it's like even back to being in if you're in a political formation and you did not betray it, but you thought you would have some autonomy in thinking and be able to critique, right? Without being censored, that could in some way become a political family, a surrogate family. And in the book, I talk about Davis's political family, like Charlene Mitchell, her brother, Charlene Mitchell's sister-in-law, Kendra Alexander. That photo inside, that's Kendra Alexander, who is married to, oh my gosh, Franklin Alexander. And that's one of Charlene's older brothers. She's the eldest, but that's one of her brothers, right? They all coming out of Chicago, working class. Their black father is a militant as well. This is intergenerational black radicals, right? Working class, very dedicated. So like in this context, I'm I'm sorry if I'm sort of jumbling around. In this context, I'm trying to make a connection with people who trained me and I learned from them. And I learned from Davis, right? But Mitchell, I'm saying, was more the mentor. And I see her kind of as a surrogate. I don't want to make her a mother figure, but the notion of the political family is you can enter what you think is a political family, think that you can be like verbal and ask questions and critiques. And then if you're constantly told to stay on message, then you realize that, well, maybe this is not really familial, right? And I think when the women philosophers reached out to me, I didn't see them as a political family, but I saw them as a group who were not going to try to intimidate me. And they would be like, well, if the facts check out, write what you want, because we don't understand this phenomena either. Because we're not even in the US, we're looking from afar and we're like, it kind of makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. What is going on here, right? And so that's how the title. So that it's not about the individual, even though I know the individual. I'm not writing about them per se. I'm doing the research to see what is surrounding them, the political, the social, the educational, right? And how is it that I called it concentric circles when I was, giving the last in the last discussion on this book. How is it that we don't want context? We want persona.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.